4 members of the 7th and 8th grade classes of Loyola Academy of St. Louis and their chaplain, Father Mark Fryer. So welcome, guys. It's a thrill to be here today as we welcome our guest speakers. But to introduce those guest speakers, I'm going to introduce you to our student body president, Mr. Harry McGuire. Harry.
Alrighty, good morning. All right, we are 34 days into the school year. So far, we've accomplished so much. We've broken records with 2,628 people at the largest high school mixer in the Midwest. We welcome, yeah. We have welcomed 241 freshmen into our brotherhood with Running the Bills. Yeah. And of course, we organized a food drive that collected over $17,000 to help those in our St. Louis community. Yeah. We have done a lot, but we are not finished. President Lincoln said that if he had 6 hours to chop down a tree, he would spend the first 4 hours sharpening his axe. We are in the midst of our 4 hours of being sharpened. Father Stewart challenged us this year with the motto to love each other. To love others not only when it is convenient or easy, but when it is challenging. The things we have done so far into this year have shown that we are stepping up to the plate, that we want to live out this motto. Our speakers today will further challenge us to show love and compassion. Our speaker today truly lives out this mission to love and support unconditionally. Father Greg Boyle is a Jesuit priest and author. He founded Homeboy Industries in 1992 and has grown to the largest gang intervention and rehab organization in the world. Homeboy Industries aids thousands of men and women with tattoo removal, therapy, education, and employment. Father Boyle embodies the belief that nobody is out of reach from God's saving grace, reminding us that there is no force in the world better able to alter anything from its course than love. It is with great honor to welcome Father Boyle and his 2 guests, Aaron and Jeffrey. Aaron and Jeffrey will be our first 2 speakers, so give it up to them.
Good morning, everybody. Bear with me, man. So I just want to say that I'm thankful to be here, and thank you guys for having me as well. My name is Jeffrey Munoz. I was originally out of Boyle Heights, California. It wasn't until about 5th, 4th grade I was put into the system, and I was raised in Compton. I grew up with an abusive father and a mother who was a drug addict who took off to chase her addiction while our dad beat us. I had 2 brothers, and later down the road, I had a baby sister. You know what I mean? And I grew up always trying to have friends, you know what I mean? But I would always get bullied. And it didn't help that at home I was already getting bullied by my brothers. So it made things harder. When I was in 4th, 5th grade, I was taken away from my father's custody due to the abuse. And right before they were going to put me in a foster home, my mother somehow appeared and took us into custody, but things only got worse. I ended up running away from home. And there was times where I spent days, weeks, even months, living in the streets. And it wasn't until then, I got caught up with the law, went to juvenile hall. But before then, I was in and out of psychiatric hospitals. I attempted to try to kill myself. And there was times due to severe depression that, they had to hospitalize me due to my past and, family trauma. at that time, that was when they officially took custody away from my fathers, and I was placed into the system. I was in a group home, and this group home that I was in, it was actually called Children of Our Future. It wasn't the best group home. I went through a lot of things there. The bullying it got worse. I got beat up. I had my clothes stolen. It was to the point where a group of kids, beat me up so bad, and they pulled out their junk and pissed all over my clothes and on me. And I reported it immediately. Excuse me. Luckily, I wasn't inappropriately touched, though I was they wanted to force me to do some things that I never wanted to do. So like I said, I immediately reported it. What they did was they transferred me to another house. But even when they transferred me to another house, it wasn't the same. Same thing kept occurring, kept getting beat up, kept getting bullied. And so they finally moved me to a different group home. And at this other group home where I was at, which was Leroy Haynes Center in Vista Del Mar, man, that's where things started to kind of turn for me. It was a lot better. I loved it. That's when I got introduced to boxing. And I fell in love with boxing. And so the last group home that I was in, which was Vista Del Mar, I had a wraparound team, and they spoke with my father, about trying to get me into boxing. And that's exactly what happened. I started to box at the age of 14. I was 269 pounds. I was an overweight kid, and I was tired of all the bullying. I was tired of all the harassment. And so boxing was really what saved my life. I finally cut down the weight. I was 245, right? But then I used everything I learned, and I became everything I hated. Ego was created, a chip on my shoulder was created, and I became everything I said I wouldn't become. I became the bully, and that led me down the wrong path. I was still looking for friends, but I was looking for friends in all the wrong places. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, boxing led me to becoming a bully, led me down gangbanging, which is, for those who don't know what gangbanging means, is, you get put onto a hood, neighborhood, and that led me down to partying and drugs. And the little boy who once grew up, being so respectful, so humble, the little kid who loved poetry, who loved anime, basically became a ghost. And I became something that I never really was, all because I wanted to look for validation, all because I was looking to fit in, and I ended up going to prison. I went to prison twice. My first time, it was really a turnaround. The second time, I sat down for about 9 years. I've been out of prison for 2 years, just got off parole about a month ago. And I didn't know what to expect. All I knew was when I got out, I knew what I wanted to do. And that was working with individuals who were also previously incarcerated like myself, working with individuals that were in rehabs, detox centers, and also with kids that were in the foster homes. Mind you, I went to Homeboys not knowing what to expect, just knowing what it was I wanted to do. And Homeboys really set that platform for me. It opened up many doors. And since being at Homeboy Industries, I've manifested, with the help of Homeboy staff and Father G, manifested that vision, that dream. And now I am a SUD-C counselor, which is a substance use disorder counselor. And I work at rehabs, I work at detox centers, and I also work at foster homes. And my type of counseling is teaching the youth and teaching people in recovery the fundamentals of Muay Thai and boxing as a form of therapy, as an outlet. And Homeboy Industries made the connection for me. They introduced me with Fighting Chance Foundation. Chase Gibson, who is a pro MMA fighter, he is the founder of Fighting Chance Foundation. He helped me through Homeboy Industries get certified. He helped me with the jobs, and now I'm also a fighter as well. My vision is to become a pro fighter so that one day I can open up my own nonprofit and help those, in similar situations that I've been in, and forgive me, I'm a little nervous up here, man. But aside from that, I do want to say this, man. I could literally stand here today and let y'all know that I don't need a label. I don't need a street name, a street hood to make me feel like I'm somebody. It made me feel like I'm inferior. It made me feel like I'm powerful, because at the end of the day, I was a coward. I needed a label. I needed a street name to make me feel like I was somebody. But in reality, I was a coward. I hid behind a label. I hid behind a street name that was given to me. You know what I mean? All for what? All for all the wrong reasons. So I'm here to tell you, man, stay true to yourself. Don't look for no validation. Don't look for a crowd. You know what I mean? Be you. And I'm here to tell you right now, all of you, every single one of you, you may not know me, I may not know you, but every single one of you, you are all potential. You are all worthy. So every day that you guys wake up and you're in that mirror, you tell yourself you're a king, you're a boss, because that's what you is. To empower the mind is to empower the body. To empower the body is to empower the mind. So remember that, and don't settle for less. People say the sky's the limit. I say, screw that. You set the limit. Because the moment you start saying the sky's the limit, you're already limiting yourself. So always keep that in mind. Bruce Lee says Bruce Lee says the mind is as weak as you choose it to be. So therefore, you can accomplish anything as long as you put your mind to it, mind, body, and soul. Stay true to yourself, man. Don't change up for nobody. And look after one another. It takes one to teach one. And I'm gonna just end it with this. I don't know if y'all familiar with an individual, but he's an artist. His name's Pop Smoke. He says, shoot for the stars, aim for the moon. What I like to say is, even if you miss the moon, you're still amongst the stars, so aim high. That being said, thank you.
Hey guys, my name's Aaron. He's nervous. I'm nervous, but I got this. I got this. So basically, I grew up in South Central LA. I came from a home of abuse, drugs as well. We have similar stories I could relate to. But growing up was hard. As a kid. Before I was 11, I would get beat. I would have to watch my mom get beat. Grew up real poor, but I had my parents, and when I got taken when I was 11, also because like the abuse, the bruises, and it's just we weren't living well. So I went to go live with my grandparents, and my grandparents were really they had structure. They were old fashioned, I'm thankful that I got to live with them for just a short time because they taught me the things that I needed to know to make it in the streets, in a sense, like morals, like respect, integrity. But I still was lost when I got taken. I ended up getting taken when I was 11 with them, and then I started. I didn't quite understand why my parents left me, because they never came back, and it made me feel rejected. It made me feel alone. I felt like nobody loved me, because if my parents couldn't love me, then who else would? And anybody who did love me, I kind of rejected it because I only wanted my parents in my life, even though they weren't the best. So I started getting arrested. I started going to jail. I started breaking the law. And once I hit the system, my grandparents couldn't handle it anymore. So at 13, they dropped custody. So after that, I had no home. I had nowhere to go, only to jail and foster home. So I spent the majority of my teens incarcerated or in placements, and I felt like I had nothing to live for, So I found something to die for. So I started gangbanging. I joined a gang. It gave me some sense of belonging. Like I felt like I had nothing. I had nowhere to belong. And so even though it was just a street, I had somewhere to be, and I felt like I belonged there. They showed me, like my friends from the neighborhood, they had showed me love. They showed me love, they showed me support, but it was in the wrong way, because I was doing bad things, And so I was fortunate. I'm fortunate because I feel like I experienced the whole transition of being a part of Homeboys. I met Father Greg in juvenile hall when I was about 14 in Mass. And he caught my attention, because he just knows how to get your attention and draw you in, So meeting him was a blessing because after when I got out of jail, I was 17 and I was kind of lost, and I was still gangbanging. I was still doing the thing. I really wasn't quite ready for the change. And Homeboys was my first job, so I started working there. It was my first job. I was 17, and things went. I wasn't ready. Like I said, I had one foot in, one foot out, and I'm sorry, I had one foot in, one foot out, and and they still accepted me, you know. And he's like, whenever you're ready, come back, you know. And I wasn't ready for a long time, but I would keep going back. I would work, let go back to jail. I didn't understand, you know, like what it was to do better. But being there, like I had the support, I had the love, I had they taught me how to be kind. They taught me to put my wall down. They taught me that I was worthy, you know. It's one of my biggest supports there, you know, and it's how it's changed my life. Like now I'm 40. I'm about to be 40, and I had to start off from the bottom, you know, and it's just been a blessing to be there, you know, and like growing up in the streets and not knowing how to love or not knowing how to do well, you know, they teach you that there, you know, and they taught me that there. So now it's like I work in the cafe now. I it's just been a blessing to be right there, you know. I was like, how many minutes do I have? Sorry, I got nervous right now. I got a brain fart, but I know because I'm staring at all the kids on the wall. I got really nervous. But the point of it is, you know, growing up in the streets and not understanding like the right way of life, and being able to be at Homeboys and change, it's just been a real blessing, you know. And now I'm trying to work with youth, you know, like, and being here is like the first time that I'm able to speak to the youth and like tell you guys, you know, like that, you know, we all can make it out here, you know. We're all similar. We're all the same, you know. And just because we grow up different styles, we all have the same heart. We all have the same intentions, you know. We all just want what's best for each other, you know. And yeah. So thank you guys for letting me share, and you guys have a great day.
Thank you all very much for your kind hospitality and for welcoming us here. And they went up in the arch yesterday. They'd never been to St. Louis before, so they had a good time. The day won't ever come when I have more courage or I am more noble or I'm closer to God than Jeffrey and Aaron and the many thousands of folks I've been privileged to know over the last 40 years. I look out at all of you. I spoke here many years ago, and coming here to a place like this, which has such a storied history, and I'm struck by, it's kind of reminds me of what Martin Luther King says about church, that St. Louis University High School is not the place you come to, as Martin Luther King used to say about church. It's not the place you come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to imagine a world looking differently. You go from here and you want God's dream to come true, where we create together a community of cherished belonging, a place where there is no us and them, there's just us. And it's a little bit like what Harry was saying about sharpening the axe. That's what you're doing. You're preparing yourself to leave. You're preparing yourself to walk out these doors finally, and then to imagine a circle of compassion, and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. You will go from here and you will choose intentionally to dismantle the barriers that exclude. And that's what a Jesuit education is about, really that. And you will decide, as you have already, to go to the margins, you know, raising $17,000 to feed the poor, and then to go share that, what you have gathered and collected with them, where it is exquisitely mutual. There is no, you know, service provider, service recipient. No, there's an equality in your compassion, and this is high quality when you do that. And you go to the margins and you stand there, because that's the only way they'll ever get erased, is if you stand out at them. And you stand with the poor and the powerless and the voiceless, and you get to stand with those whose dignity has been denied and those whose burdens are more than they can bear. And you will go from here, and you will have the exquisite privilege to be able to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out. You will get to stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. And you will go from here, and you're going to kind of have to brace yourselves, because people at the margins are awaiting you to stand with them, and everybody else will be accusing you of wasting your time at the margins. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, "For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing." And you go from here and other voices get heard. Well, none of that makes any damn sense, I don't think, unless we're anchored in a God that's spacious and expansive. What St. Ignatius of Loyola used to call paying the electrician bill here. There we go, yeah. And Ignatius used to talk about the God is always greater. And so we want to be connected to this God so that we can choose to be in the world who God is, compassionate and loving and kind. A homie emailed me the other day. He ended the email by saying, "Today I will surrender into the arms of God and then choose to be those arms." And that's exactly what Jesuit education is all about. You will leave this place to do that. But you need to have a large sense of who God is. I remember years ago, I was saying Mass at San Fernando Juvenile Hall, and it had about 200 gang members in this gym. And I was seated on a kind of a raised platform, and I had my album, my stole, and they had these sheets that had the readings in them in English and in Spanish so you could follow along. And I thought, well, I'm going to just fold this sheet thing on my lap and just close my eyes and listen to the word proclaimed. So I was over here, and the homies came up over here, and the first one did the reading from the Old Testament, and then the second guy got up to do the responsorial psalm. And I had my eyes closed. I was listening, and I thought, well, there's a kind of an overabundance of confidence in this guy's voice. And he gets up and he says, "The Lord is exhausted." And I said, "What the hell?" And I looked at it. It was, "The Lord is exalted." And I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's way better. Because that's kind of what we need to be, is kind of exhausted in our generosity. You understand what exhausted means, that you're generative, that you're giving of yourself. You have found your true self in loving. And once you find that, you know that loving is your home, and then you will never be homesick. So Homeboy Industries was started a long time ago, 1988, during the time I was pastor of the poorest parish in Los Angeles, nestled in the middle of two public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. At the time, it was the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other in the housing projects in my tiny little parish, which is unheard of. You would never have that many gangs. And the LAPD called my parish the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city. So if LA was the gang capital of the world, my parish was the gang capital of Los Angeles. We have 120,000 gang members in LA County and 1,100 gangs. I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988. And 3 months ago, I buried my 263rd. Not all from that parish, but I know a lot of gang members. I get asked to do this. So the first thing we did was we started a school, because there were so many junior high, middle school aged gang members who got the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them. So they were wreaking havoc in the projects. They were writing on the walls. They were selling drugs. They were violent. And so I walked out to where they were kicking it, and I would kind of isolate them one at a time. I'd say, hey, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, they all said yes, we would. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them. So that forced my hand. And so across the street from our church is our parochial school, grades K to 8, which occupied the first 2 floors of a big concrete building. The 3rd floor was the convent. And so one evening I sat all the nuns down. There were about 8 of them. I sat them down in the living room, and I said, hey, would you guys mind, moving out, and we could turn the convent into a school for gang members? And they looked at each other and they said, sure. And that was the extent of their discernment process. And so we were off and running, and members from all 8 gangs showed up at the school on the 3rd floor. And it was kind of dicey, They came to school, but we'd have like 3 brawls a day. I'd have to run over from the rectory. Teachers didn't last long. Once I had a principal who lasted exactly 1 day. I called him the next day to find out where the hell he was, and he'd changed his number and had checked into a witness protection program, apparently. But they came every day, which was kind of remarkable. And then they said, if only we had jobs. And so myself and the women in the parish was mainly women with children, not a lot of men. Myself and the women, we marched around the factories that surrounded the housing projects, trying to find felony-friendly employers. And that wasn't so forthcoming. So we started things, a maintenance crew, a landscaping crew, a crew to build our child care center at the church, all made up of members of the rival 8 gangs. Then in 1992, the very last day of April, after the acquittal of the 4 police officers who beat down Rodney King, every pocket of poverty in Los Angeles just ignited, except the poorest pocket, my parish. So the LA Times wandered in a couple days after things started and wanted to know why that was. And I said, well, I'm not sure entirely, but, we had 60 strategically hired rival gang members who had a reason to get up in the morning and a reason not to gangbang the night before. And more to the point of your question, they had a reason not to torch their own community. So the article appeared the next day. Well, the following day, I was summoned to the Beverly Hills office of a very wealthy movie producer, Ray Stark, who happened to have $500 million. And he said, how should I spend my money? And as I look back on it now, I can see that I woefully undershot my request, but I was young, I had hair. I said, well, you could buy this bakery. It's across the street from the school. It has ovens. They don't work. You could fix them. We could put hairnets on rival enemy gang members. They could bake bread, and we could call it Homeboy Bakery. And he said, sure. So then we were off and running. And then a month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas in the Grand Central Market in downtown LA. Once we had plural, we changed our name. We had called ourselves initially Jobs for a Future. And we changed it to Homeboy Industries. And nobody intends to do anything like this, but we backed our way, evolved our way now into becoming the largest gang intervention rehab reentry program on the planet. So 10,000 folks a year walk through our doors wanting to reimagine their lives. Every single one comes through the doors barricaded behind a wall of shame and disgrace. And the only thing that can scale that wall is tenderness. Every single one comes with what psychologists would call a disorganized attachment. Mom was either frightened or frightening. And you can't calm yourself down if you've never been soothed. And so soothing is kind of what happens there. Homies come through those doors and they are welcomed to a place that is safe. And then they feel seen. And once they're seen, they can have the experience of being cherished. Homies who've been locked up for 30 years will say, we're used to being watched, but we're not used to being seen. And so if it's true that the traumatized are likely to cause trauma, then it has to be equally true that the cherished will be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and others. But you have to greet them and welcome them. And then it's the community of tenderness that keeps providing a dose every day. It's why people come back after they've been there. And sometimes it's hard, it's like you can't take so much love and you come back until you're ready. In recovery, drug and alcohol, but also gang recovery, they say it takes what it takes. The birth of a son, the death of a friend, a long stretch in prison. Many years ago, I knew a homie named Danny, and I met him when he was 13 years old, and I would ride my beach cruiser through the parish at night, late at night, after midnight. And I would see this kid, and he was a tough guy. And he was only 13, and when I'd see him in the alley where the homies would kick it, and he always made a point to lift his shirt up so I could see that he had a gun tucked into the front of his pants. I don't know why he wanted me to see this, but he always did. And once he made a solemn vow to me. He said, I swear to you, I will never step foot in Homeboy Industries. I went, So it takes what it takes. And I knew him, in juvenile hall and probation camp and all these detention facilities. Finally, at 18, he goes to prison for just 2 years. And when he got out, it takes what it takes. He discovered that his mother had 6 months to live. She had pancreatic cancer. He had a lot of siblings, but he ended up being the hospice caregiver. And I went over to his house and I watched him take care of his mom, and very tender, which was all the more remarkable because this woman was in fact quite torturous to him. So I remember I went there one day and I anointed her. A week later, she died. A week after that, we buried her. And a week after that, Danny walks for the first time into our doors at our headquarters in Chinatown. And I watch him work side by side with guys I know he used to shoot at, because I remember. And I watch him laugh from the stomach, as we say at Homeboy. And I watch him get his GED, and it takes what it takes. And I watch him be transformed by being in a community of kinship and tenderness. One day he comes into my office and he sits down and he begins very dramatically. He says, "What happened yesterday has never happened to me in my life." And he proceeds to tell me that he, after work at 5, he goes across the street to the Orange Line, which is in Chinatown stop, and he takes the train to go east, to go home. And he said the train was packed, but I was able to get a seat. And standing right in front of him, holding onto the pole, he says, was a medio pedo guy, a guy who was a little bit drunk. And he goes, "I can see he's a gang member, older vato had tattoos on his hand. He's hanging onto the pole. Danny's wearing a sweatshirt that says Homeboy Industries, jobs, not jails." And the little bit drunk guy looks at him and he says, "Hey, you work there?" And Danny doesn't know whether to fully engage this guy, so he just nods. And the guy says, "Is it any good?" And Danny kind of shrugs. He says, well, it's helped me. In fact, I don't think I'm going to go back to prison because of this place. And then Danny stands up and he sees this guy. And he reaches into his pocket, he pulls out a tiny piece of paper and he has a pen and he starts to write very carefully the address at Homeboy Industries. And as he's telling me this story, he says, I couldn't believe I knew the address by heart. And he finishes it. He hands it to the guy and the guy takes it. And Danny says, you come see us. We'll help you. And the guy studies the piece of paper and he looks at Danny and he sees him and he says, thank you. And the train stops and the guy gets off and Danny returns to his seat. And now he returns to that earlier refrain. What happened to me next has never happened to me before in my life. Everyone on the train was staring at me. Everyone on the train was nodding at me. Everyone on the train was smiling at me. And now he can barely speak. And for the first time in my life, I felt admired. Long lay the world in sin and error pining till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. Yeah, it's a Christmas carol about Jesus. But how is it not the job description of each one of you as you prepare, sharpening the axe to leave this place eventually? To create a community, especially at a time in our country when it is the only way that we can shorten the darkness, is by obliterating once and for all the illusion that we are separate, that there is an us and a them. At Homeboy Industries, we're allergic to the idea of holding the bar up and asking homies to measure up, mainly because our exhausted God never does that with us. Instead, we hold the mirror up and we tell folks the truth, that they are exactly what God had in mind when God made them. And then you watch as they become that truth, as they inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out. And death can't touch it because it's huge. But at Homeboy, we know that you have to reach in and you have to dismantle the messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that keep people from seeing their truth. This place is not the place you've come to. It is the place you go from, not to save the day or to even make a difference. Because if you go to the margins to make a difference, then it's about you. It can't be about you. You go to the margins so that the folks at the margins make you different. And then it's about us. And that's the goal. But you have to reach in and dismantle these messages of shame and disgrace. Parentheses. So I'm a Jesuit. And there are 3 of us Jesuits who work at Homeboy Industries. But the homies don't really know so much like what a Jesuit is, you know. And even though we always have had nearly 3 Jesuits always working there. But so my office is a kind of a glass enclosed thing right in the middle, and I can look out onto the floor of the reception area, which is always quite full. And then I can see who's coming through the door. And so I'm sitting behind the desk, and I have 2 homies in front of my desk. And we have like 8 tours a day from folks all over the world. And I invite you, if you ever come on an immersion trip or come through, get a tour, because they're really good tours. The homies give the tours. And so all of a sudden, there's a big tour. It's like 20 people, and they plant themselves right in front of my glass enclosed office. And it's one of those observe our founder in his natural habitat kinds of moments. And I wave faintly. And the guy giving the tour is Osvaldo, and he has what the homies call a loud ass voice. And so he stands there and he says, "This is Father Greg Boyle. He is the founder of Homeboy Industries. He is a jujitsu priest," and so from my desk, I try to do some of my more impressive moves. Anyway, I tell you that to tell you this, that St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, on February 28th, 1540, enters for the first time in his spiritual diary this word. He proceeds to use the word a lot for the remaining 12 years of his life. Before he dies, he goes back and he circles the word for all the times he's used it. Now, I speak Spanish, but I had never heard this word before. And the word is acatamiento. Acatamiento. And it comes from kind of an archaic word, acatar, which means to look at something with attention. And it gets translated as affectionate awe. And though I know Ignatius, I suspect this was born of a singular, individual, private, solitary moment with his God of love. I want to think that he wanted it to be an answer to the question, what should our disposition and stance be when you go from this high school to stand at the margins after you've graduated from here? What's our disposition? How ought we to stand there? And the answer is affectionate awe, which reminds me of the Acts of the Apostles, where it has this one line and it says, "And awe came upon everyone." And it suggests that the measure of health in every community anywhere, including this one, may well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry it. So many years ago, I was invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia. And it was what we used to call in those days a gang in-service. And it meant 600 social workers would commandeer a hotel ballroom and they'd sign in and get credits. And from 9 to 5, they heard keynotes, speeches, and workshops and breakout sessions, all trying to help social workers understand that no hopeful kid has ever joined a gang in the history of the world, trying to help them understand that gang violence is about a lethal absence of hope. How do we infuse hope to kids for whom hope is foreign? How do we help heal the traumatized so they can transform their pain and no longer transmit it? And how do we deliver mental health services in a timely and culturally appropriate way? From 88 to 98 in the decade of death, we had a lot of these all over the country, and I went to a lot of them. And so I said, yes, I bought my ticket to Richmond, Virginia, figuring maybe I'll do a keynote or something. And so a week before I was to fly, I pull out the letter that's inviting me to go to this in-service. And to my horror, I discover that I am to be the only speaker from 9 to 5 all damn day. And I said to myself what the homies often say, oh, hell no, I'm not going to be the only speaker. So I invited 2 homies who are part of our 18-month training program, where they come in for 18 months. We have 14 social enterprises, from dog grooming to Homegirl Cafe, where Aaron works, to silk screening, to a lot of places. And then we have free tattoo removal. We have lots of departments like substance use disorder. So I picked 2 homies, enemies with each other, Andre, an African-American gang member, and Jose. And I sit them down, they're in like their 9th month at Homeboy. And I said, look, at the end of the week, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I'd like you to get up in front of 600 social workers and tell your stories. Take your time, because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I'd never heard their stories before, and Jose gets up first, and he's like 25 years old. Shot caller from his gang, in prison, felon, tattooed. In his 9th month, he was kind of locked on to the substance use disorder team, a man solid in his own recovery. Now he's helping younger homies with their addiction issues. So not only was he a shot caller, a gang member, tattooed felon, he also had a long stretch as a homeless man, even longer stretch as a heroin addict. So he gets up in front of 600 social workers. And he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasp. And then he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish. And they went from gasp to laugh. And then he continued. He said, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California. And she walks me up to an orphanage and she knocks on the door and the guy comes to the door and she says, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me. And my grandmother came and rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day, my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school each day. First t-shirt, because the blood would seep through, and second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking, so overwhelmed with emotion. And he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. Acatamiento, affectionate awe. When you prepare to leave this place, the measure of your compassion lies not in your service of those on the margins, but only in your willingness to see yourselves in kinship with them. For the truth of the matter is this: if you don't welcome your own wounds, you may well be tempted to despise the wounded. And so you leave this place eventually, and you stay as close as you can to the marrow of the gospel, and you decide to only take seriously what Jesus took seriously. And fortunately for us, there are only 4 things: inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. Stay close to the marrow of the gospel. Let me just end with one last story. It occurs sometimes, mainly in jiu-jitsu schools, to force their students to occasionally read my books against their will. And I'm not complaining, but many years ago, my alma mater, Gonzaga University in Spokane, who ruins my brackets every March, they enforced all their incoming freshmen to read Tattoos on the Heart. So they said, could you come, and could you bring 2 homies with you? And so I do if people ask, and sometimes even when they don't. But I said, sure. And so generally speaking, I pick homies in 2 different ways. I almost always pick enemies, rivals, just to force them to share a hotel room, just to mess with them. And I always pick homies who have never flown before for the thrill to watch gang members panicked in the sky, Once I had these 2 older vatos, and we were at LAX, and the homie says, hey, gee, are we flying Virgin Airlines because it's our first time? I said, yes, it's a requirement. We'll be coming home on American. So I picked these 2 homies, Larry, African-American gang member, and Mario. And, I've been on the road a lot and take homies with me. And so I'm used to nervous Nellies. Ooh, nothing prepared me for Mario because he was just paniqueado. He was so terrified. It was kind of starting to freak me out a little bit. He was hyperventilating, which I'd never witnessed in a human being before. He's like that. And we hadn't even, boarded the plane yet. But so we were at Burbank Airport, which is smallish, but big planes, big Southwest Airlines planes. And you don't board the plane with that hermetically sealed chute. You have to walk out onto the tarmac like you're the president. And you walk up the steps to board the front of the plane. Or, big feature at Burbank, the steps to board the back of the plane. And Larry is off exploring the airport. I'm sitting there with Mario, and it's early morning. It's still kind of dark. It's the first flight of the day. And I see our flight crew arrives, and there are 2 flight attendants, females. Both of them have very large cups of Starbucks coffee, and they're schlepping up the steps to board the front of the plane. And just then Mario goes, when are we going to board the plane? And I said, as soon as they sober up the pilots. There they go now. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that, but I should tell you that Mario, in our 37-year history, is the most tattooed individual who's ever worked there, which is really saying something. He's all sleeved out to his fingertips with tattoos. Neck blackened with the name of his gang. Head shaved, covered in tattoos. Forehead, cheeks, chin, eyelids that say the end, so that apparently when he's lying in his coffin, there will be no doubt for anybody, I guess. I'd never been in public with him. And so I thought to myself, well, let me walk him through the airport. Maybe it'll calm his ass down. And so we're walking through, and it just blew me away. People are like, oh my God. And mothers are clutching their kids a little more closely. I'm going, wow, isn't that odd? Because if you were to go to Homeboy tomorrow, walk up to anybody there who works there and say, quick, who's the kindest, most gentle soul who works here? They'd think for exactly 1 beat. And then every single person would say, Mario. Yeah, Mario. Mario is proof that only the soul that ventilates the world with tenderness has any chance of changing the world. He is proof that the only non-delusional response to everything is kindness. So we get to Gonzaga, and there's the Big Talk Tuesday night, which is a huge venue with like 1,000 people. But what they don't tell you is they'd like you to go talk to a bunch of classrooms, before. And I go, híjole, just invite them to the talk. But oh well. So we go to about 93 classes. And I said, I'm going to sit in the back of the classroom. You guys get up and talk. And they told their stories. Mario was particularly nervous, but they did a good job. Stories of torture and terror and violence and abuse of every imaginable kind. And honest to God, if their stories had been flames, you'd have to keep your distance. Otherwise, you'd get scorched. I would not have survived a single day of either of their childhoods. So we get to the big venue, and like Jeffrey and Aaron, the two of them got up first and told their stories and did a good job, though again, Mario was nervous. And then they sat down, I got up and I did my thing. And then I called them up, and they were on either side, and we had, time for some questions, even with 1,000 people. And yes, ma'am. And a woman stands and she says, yeah, I got a question. It's for Mario. First question out the gate is for Mario. Well, Mario's just terrified. He clutches the microphone. He's this tall, skinny drink of water, and he's clutching the microphone. He's starting to tremble, and he says, yes. And the woman says, well, Mario, you say you're a father and you have a son and a daughter. They're about to reach their teenage years. What wisdom do you impart to them? What advice do you give them? And Mario closes his eyes and he clutches the microphone with even greater intensity. And now he's trembling and he's getting a friggin' hernia trying to come up with whatever the hell he's going to say. But he wants to get this entire sentence out. Finally, he says, and as soon as he says those two words, he rushes back to his microphone clutching, closed-eyed refuge. But he really wants to get the entirety of the sentence out into the world. And finally, I know he's losing his battle against his tears. And he says, I just don't want my kids to turn out to be like me. And there's silence until the woman who asked the question stands again. Now it's her turn to cry. Why wouldn't you want your kids to turn out to be like you? You are loving, you are kind, you are gentle, you are wise. I hope your kids turn out to be like you. Well, 1,000 total perfect strangers stand, and they will not stop clapping. And all Mario can do is hold his face in his hands, so overwhelmed that this room full of strangers had returned him to himself. And let there be no doubt that everybody standing had been returned to themselves. And I think that's the only praise our exhausted God has any interest in. This place is not the place you've come to. It was always going to be the place you go from. To take seriously what Jesus took seriously. The marrow of the gospel. Inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. This is the place you go from to stand at the margins so that they will get erased. To imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. To go from this place and seriously dismantle the barriers that exclude. And you will go from this place, trust me, and you will have fully ceased to care if the world accuses you of wasting your time standing at the margins. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. Thank you very much.
I want to thank all of you, gentlemen, for listening intently. And hopefully you've opened your hearts and your minds to the message, not only of the book, Tattoos in the Heart, but of what Jeffrey and Aaron shared, and of course, what Father Boyle shared as well. You know, many of us often use Proverbs 27:17 in our sports lives, in our lives. And if you don't know what quote that is, it's, you know, you are steel and you sharpen the steel of others. And, you know, I think the reference to that Acts at the beginning is really what we are really here and why you come here. And as Father Boyle said, hopefully how you leave here. Dismantle the barriers that exclude. Have the humility and the courage to stand at the margins. And for all of our seniors who are heading to senior service projects this year, sometimes in your busy lives, the risk is that it's several days off that you're not in class. It's go and do service for someone. But I hope you remember Father Boyle, Jeff, and Aaron's voices when you start to go to those margins, because it's at that point that 4 years is supposed to come together, and it's about walking with. It's about having that humility and the courage to stand at the margins with. And as Father Boyle said, it's about transforming you as much or more than it is about helping someone else. Father Boyle, I've been blessed over my career to hear you speak many times, and the experience always fills my heart. And in times where perhaps our faith and our hope in humanity is challenged, you filled my heart this morning, and hopefully you filled the hearts of many in our crowd, in our student body, our faculty, and our staff, everyone here who works so hard on the mission. We are blessed by great teachers and adult formators, but sometimes we need a little boost. And we appreciate you and Aaron and Jeffrey for being that boost for our school year, to help us with our theme, to learn how to be loving, and really that agape form of love we so often forget about. So thank you very, very much. Thank you. Gentlemen, another hand for Father.
Gentlemen, I just want to echo Mr. Carruthers' thanks to each of you for your careful attention to what Aaron and Jeffrey and Father Greg had to say today. Some hard stories, but some beautiful stories of people seeing themselves as they are. The invitation that every single one of us is given. So, I'm going to introduce Dr. K here in a second, who's going to dismiss you guys. But thank you. If you hadn't yet read Tattoos on the Heart, I hope now every single one of you will. Dr. K.